Good morning. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I'm Melissa Nielsen of Waldorf Essentials, and I thought I would talk about a few things this morning. My biggest topic for today is sort of what to do when you've got a young child that's already reading, and sort of how you approach that sort of within Waldorf boundaries. And but first, I thought I would remind everybody our sale, our 30% off our site is going strong, and so I was going to close it on Tuesday, but I think I will let it go all the way through Friday or Saturday. So I'm going to change that up a little bit today, and I'll put a message on our Facebook group or on our Facebook page, and send it out in our email as well. So if you're in one of those spots, make sure you look, and so that's for 30% off. Plus, we have our big announcements about our lifetime membership only being available once a year now, and that will be coming to a close in the next 2 weeks, and then it won't be available again until next July. So the enrollment period is from July to August. So if it's something that you're considering, you really should consider it hard and take advantage of the 30% off. We also have the payment plan for 30% off. So both of those would work if that's something that you're considering. The other thing is if we have our giveaway that's going on. So if you've purchased and shared or shared and donated, then please make sure you mention it on the thread for the giveaway. And that's I've pinned it to the top on our Facebook page right now, the Waldorf Essentials with Melissa Nielsen page. So if you have done those two things, please make sure you put your name in for the running for a $75 gift certificate from Pamela at Meadow Sweet Naturals. So that's out of the way. Today's topic is sort of what do you do when you've got maybe a 4, 5, 6-year-old, somebody that's earlier than first grade reading already. And I get this question a lot. I think that we're seeing it more and more. I don't think that if Steiner were here, he would change his ideas on things. I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is that we shouldn't be pushing that. And if you're new to Waldorf, I'm going to say some things that are probably going to make you go, this lady is crazy. But if you read and you understand sort of Steiner's background with things and sort of the way he discusses how it works on our body and sort of then the longevity of that, then you'll probably understand a little bit more. But please feel free to ask me. Feel free to send me a message after this and ask me for backup if you'd like the Steiner references for backup. So when we have a child let's back up first and look at, especially with homeschooling, we sort of have this situation where we feel like, and I don't anymore because I've been at this for a while, but I do remember what that's like, to feel like the parent that has to prove this homeschooling thing is working. See, look, my 4-year-old is reading, sort of like that. And so I think that it's easy as homeschooling parents to sort of encourage that and applaud that and say, hey, let's do more of that. And oh my goodness, I'm so excited that you're doing that kind of thing. And so really sort of pushing them along. And so I would not push that along. I would push along gross motor skills, climbing, using the jungle gym, and sort of climbing across the top of the jungle gym, one hand over the other. I would push finger knitting. I would push even playing a musical instrument. I would allow all of those things to unfold and really begin to unfold fully before I would say, let's sit down and start reading. So, Steiner believed that reading really should happen in first grade. And so that's close to 7, a child that's 6 going on 7 or just about 7. And so we want to sort of be careful about pushing that beforehand. So I understand there's a lot of kids that learn on their own. That's totally understandable. I know that there are kids that sort of come to mom and go, look what I can do. And mom's like, oh crap, that's not what I was going to do this whole plan about having you wait till first grade. And now look what happened. And so you can't feel guilty about that, because unfolding means unfolding, and some children will unfold naturally with all of a sudden they have this decoded. And that is, I think, the nature of of what you have with humanity. I think you've got some people that come to things earlier than others, and that does not mean that they're ready for the first grade curriculum. And the first grade curriculum in Waldorf, so understanding the Waldorf curriculum will help with this. When you understand the Waldorf curriculum, you know that each grade or each class is set up for the age of the child. So if you start a 4-year-old on the first grade curriculum with the content, the lesson content of first grade, because the lesson content is way more than just learning how to read. The lesson content of first grade is some more complex fairy tales and those sorts of things. So if you start at age 4, then you're going to be off the Waldorf curriculum. So do not think that just because your child is reading, that means you should start the first grade curriculum. The first grade curriculum is intended for the child that is 6, almost 7. That doesn't mean 6 and 2 months. That means like 6 and 9 months or 6 and 10 months. And they're almost 7. You want your child to be the age that they should be for that grade for more than half the school year, if at all possible. So my general cutoff for me is generally about February, March, depending on the child, early March. When we're looking at April, then I often say wait till the next year. Now, I have a lot of moms go, really, you have to wait that long? You don't have to. One thing that I would say, if you're really bent on starting a child that turned 6 in April, and you're really bent on starting them in first grade in the fall, is let's start those first few lesson blocks, do some math and do more form drawing, and wait until maybe December or even January to sort of bring in the fairy tale material and the stuff that's geared for their age. And you'll have to do that at least for the first couple of years of school, and then you can sort of see where they're at after that. You know, I had two with my big kids. I had 2 January birthdays and a March birthday. And my March birthday, he was early March, but he was also super squirrely. And he's also a straight A student in the public school where he goes. But he was super squirrely. And so every year I would pull 2 of the lesson blocks from the previous year and put those into September and October, so that we were covering those. So say, like, not so much with 3rd grade, but by 4th grade. So we would maybe cover some of the Norse myths then, and as we were getting ready to go into the Greek myths in 5th grade. So he would have some of the year prior's content as we were moving into the next year, and we sort of did that staggering all the way up through high school for him. And then in high school it was a lot easier to just sort of go look at the material. And so keep that in mind if you are going to start a child early. But let's sort of back up to the topic of what do you do when you have a child that's reading and they're, say, 4, 5, 6, and you're not going to start them in 1st grade, obviously, because we know that that's not the place for them to be. So what should we be doing with them? How do we support that? I do think that if you have a child that's just beginning to decode it and they're 4, 5, 6, I sort of step back and watch, because there's so many things that happen with decoding that will sometimes automatically go to sleep. I would not encourage, yes, let's do that some more. And I would have a stern finger for grandparents, a well-meaning aunt, dad, that are not on board, and I would give them the literature to read, and I would really work to be in a situation where you can let them unfold. So if they unfold and that means they're reading by 5 and they're unfolding on their own, that's fine. But if you're pushing, then you're going to sacrifice something else, and you don't want to do that. So you make sure that if you have a child that's super in their head, that they're getting a ton of movement. And I mean a ton. So in a Waldorf school, movement is 1/3 of their day. So I want you to think about that. They're in school for, say, 6 hours in a traditional Waldorf school, and 2 of those hours, 2 full hours, are them moving. And that might be eurythmy, that might be the playground, that might be the games teacher, that might be a lot. So we have a lot to make sure that we keep up on here at home when it comes to movement and thinking about your day. So I want you, and this would be for all parents, not just for parents of kids that are trying to read early, I want you to really think about how much movement you're getting. And for us, we've always tried to go on a morning walk. And when we lived in cold areas, we did yoga on the mornings that we couldn't actually get outside. There's some great, like we did the yoga garden game, and My Daddy is a Pretzel book and cards. And so there are some great resources for that are appropriate for their age. So we always made sure we had a ton of movement. And even, now we live in San Diego, we got a ton of movement. We're outside all the time. So, I would really be careful about how much movement you're getting. Make sure you're getting enough, especially if you have a child that is super in their head and wants to sort of be in front of a book all the time. So, and that's not a bad thing. I think that it gets sort of a bad rap sometimes. Oh, Waldorf, they're those people that don't read until third grade. And no, I don't buy that at all, especially not homeschooling. Homeschooling, you're really working to get them reading. I think between first and second grade is generally where I see them reading the most. And so, but before that, there are so many things that you can be doing and really ensuring that that they are getting sort of full rounded. So one of the things that I would say for if they already are reading is, because then the problem is, okay, my 5-year-old is reading. What in the heck do they read? Because so many chapter books are really geared towards the older child. And so really take that into consideration when you're choosing what to read. When you're looking at like what to read a 5-year-old or what to let a 5-year-old read that's already reading, stick with picture books as much as you can. And try not to grab, and I know you're going to have well-meaning family members that are like, here's this great book on anatomy. Here's the solar system. Stick with picture books that you would be reading them anyway. So if you were taking your 5-year-old to the library and picking out books for them, those are the books they should be reading. They should be reading picture books, things that are lighthearted and simple. And, the 5-year-old, the complexity of stories that a 4 or 5 and a 5, 6-year-old can handle are a lot different. And so I would definitely look at that, like the complexity of the story that you're bringing, and keep their reading material to the picture book. So now if you've got like a 5, 6 and they are like super tired of picture books, Mom, I don't want another picture book. I want a chapter book. I'm a big kid and I want a chapter book I can read. So, I know that happens. So you've got, that happens often, that you've got like a 5, 6-year-old that's in that spot. So I would recommend books like, there's a compilation of like the Frog and Toad books. There's the Little Bear books. There's Mouse Soup. So those would be early chapter readers that I think would be fine for the child that is like this avid reader at 5 and 6. And I would pace them. Just because they read through it once doesn't mean they need to be done. So because at that age, they're really looking at repetition, I would absolutely say, oh, you finished it. Well, let's read it again and sort of go through it. And I think that's super helpful, especially if Mom is working on maybe reading something again for the 3rd time, or you're referencing back to a book on a regular basis, because then you can say, look, I read this book all the time, kind of thing. And so, be thinking about those sorts of things and keeping their reading in a place that isn't sort of pushing them into farther and farther until they're in 1st grade. Once they've gotten to that space where the green light, their body is ready to handle that, then definitely let them go. But still, you want to keep their content at their age. So a 1st grader might be wanting to read some fairy tales. That would be fine. But don't hand them that solar system book in 1st grade. So it's about really finding the material that's appropriate for them. So let's see, I have a few questions here. One mom says she PM'd me. Yep, I got that, and I'll respond this morning. And what about reading to them, Little House on the Prairie? I think that's different. So if you're reading to them, because when you're reading to them, you can really sort of gauge what level they're listening to. I can remember my big 3 kids when they were probably 5, 7, 9, and we read the Chronicles of Narnia books. But who was really listening? My 9-year-old. He was the one that was really listening. Because I asked my daughter now, she's 15 and a half, I'm like, oh, we read the Chronicles of Narnia. She's like, I don't remember reading that. Because she was off in her little 5-year-old place at the time. So even though they sat there and they listened to me because that was our quiet time during the day, it was because they were with me. It was because they were in that spot. So I think that for sure reading to them is great. I think that you'll see, I think the Little House books are good books, and I think that they probably would hit the 5-6-year-old probably girl before they would hit the boy. Now, I have a 10-year-old boy that loves the Little House books, so, you know, definitely, there are definitely exceptions. But one thing that I try to keep in mind when it comes to reading material, because I know when you're starting off, or when you've got younger kids and older kids, the temptation is to go, this is such a great book, I want them to hear it. But one of the things that I look at is, like, for the Little House books, while I think they would be fine to read to, say, the 5-6-year-old, I like them for 3rd grade. Because in the farming blocks and sort of helping them to understand farming. And so we read Farmer Boy and the Little House books. And so those are good chapter books for them to read then. So I also go, if I let them do this now, what am I going to use during their main lesson time, you know, during those years? So really think about that when you're faced with a book that you really want to read, and go, is this something that they maybe could benefit more from when it hits them properly at their age, and sort of think about that. And, you know, I'm always on hand. You can always send me a PM and go, hey, I was thinking about this book with my kid, and I'm always happy to sort of give you my thoughts on it. But also, you know, I would say prayer and meditation are really good ways to decide whether or not a book is appropriate for what you're doing, and then whether or not you're going to need that later on down the road. So look at the curriculum chart. You know, we have a curriculum chart on our site. Look at the curriculum chart and decide, hey, maybe I should wait because this would fit better over here in this grade. So, okay, let's see. What would you do if you made the mistake of letting your early reader perhaps read too many advanced things, maybe like things with too much conflict, good guys, bad guys? My son started to read more. Hold on, I have to push the read more. My son started to read more. He's now obsessed with violence and bad guys. He wants to read sort of middle chapter books, like fantasy stuff, good guys, bad guys. So I think that, how old is your son? He's 6.5. So I think that one thing that's hard, when we do sort of open that door, it's harder to sort of rein them back in. But it can happen. So I would focus his good guy, bad guy stories on stories of valor, stories of, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, even though you're going to read that later. Some dialed down versions for kids. I would look at, that's where, even though I'm not a huge proponent, I'm actually not a proponent at all of abridged work. I think abridged work can be great for a younger child, and something that's more towards their level. So I would look at trying to bring back some of that magic, and I would also look at, what is a bad guy? You know, I think that's it's easy for kids to go good guy, bad guy. So really sort of looking at, especially with your child being 6.5, I would look at, let's talk about that. What makes a bad guy? And sort of, looking at those qualities and those attributes, and what is it about the conflict that your child is really liking? Is there something else going on? And sort of get to the bottom of that a little bit. Sorry, I'm all itchy this morning. I'm not sure what that's all about. Anyway, so sort of probe a little bit more, and I would absolutely bring in some of those other stories, and if you're going to be doing sort of the good guy, bad guy stuff, I would try to bring that back. There's a series that I like, that I usually suggest for 1st grade, called My Father's Dragon, and most little boys really eat that up. And it's a 3-book series, and so maybe start someplace there, because that sort of brings some magic back. It's about this little boy, and he has this dragon, and he saves the dragon, and it's a very beautiful old story. So maybe use something like that to sort of bring them back, or bring him back to this place of magic. Anyway, It is hard to rein it in once we've opened the door. Absolutely. Listen, I get it. You're talking to a mom that allowed one stuffed animal from My Little Pony, and it took me 6 months to eradicate My Little Pony from my house. So I understand when you open the door and you go, what did I do? I totally get that. So I think we're all probably guilty of that at some point where we go, oh, that was not a good idea. Let's see, Mom asked, is there a book resource that talks about developmental milestones of Learning by Roberto Trostley? I think is a really good book on understanding just Waldorf and Steiner and development as a whole. I think that's an excellent book. And it is very heady, so y'all probably want to read chunks of it at a time. But it is excellent for understanding those things. But as far as like, we have reading lists. So if you go to our blog, there's actually a category that says book list and supply list for each grade. And so we list, especially for the earlier grades, we list books that we like to use for curriculum for the older grades, but then we also have a book list for like the kindergarten and early years situation. So, definitely you can see those on our blog. And I probably need to update it because we bought some more books. But generally, I would say if you can get a child that's reading, that's 4 or 5, read all the Elsa Pascal books, and then read all the Jan Brett books, and then you'll be busy for a while. So, don't think that just because they're reading and they're 4 or 5, that means you have to jump into big, long, heady books. I would keep them in picture books as long as you can. Okay, more questions here. Repetition is good. Yep. Reading the books to them, then allowing the repetition is good. And so I absolutely think that if you're reading to them, like, again, the Little House books when they're younger, and then they're going to read it again, I think that's okay. I just generally try to look at it and go, is this going to touch what I want it to touch in my child right now? And maybe it will. Sometimes it depends on the child. Definitely depends on the age and the temperament and sort of where they're at. So, thinking about that whole big picture, what are you trying to get from sharing this book with your child right now? And I know a lot of us have books that we loved when we were kids. Like, I loved Anne of Green Gables. Loved it when I think I was like maybe 11 or 12 when I read it. And then I devoured all of that I could. My daughter had zero interest when she was that age. Zero. And so, I think that a lot of what we want to bring to them is stuff that we loved. And so, it takes time to just sort of look and decide and see and think about each child differently. So, let's see. I'm really want to rein it back in. Well, looking at stuff like okay. I think that, let me read what else you said here. Sorry. My husband is resistant to give it up. And this is back on the mom that has the early reader with the good, bad stuff. I would just look for better resources that are okay for his age. And there are some resources that are okay for his age. I think that, we go into Barnes & Noble and there's so much crap. I seriously, because, my husband loves comics and I love going to the comic book movies with him and we really have a good time. But rarely are any of them okay for the 5-6-year-old. And so when I go into Barnes & Noble and I see these early readers about the Avengers, I'm like, really? You couldn't come up with something better? Early readers about Star Wars. And so it depends on where, if we're just, so some of the Star Wars runs are kind of funny because it's just describing who the characters are, but it's not actually doing the storyline. But when they describe the storyline, it drives me crazy because it is a very violent storyline. And so, yeah, that sort of drives me crazy. But yeah, this other mom is saying, Winnie the Pooh, yes. And the doll books, yes, those are good. I think there's a lot of things you could read. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think, is awesome. And I think that series would reach the 5-year-old to the 10-year-old plus. Gosh, I love that book. So I think that there are plenty of stories that could span the age groups that you would be fine with for the younger child. And then as far as like bringing that fantasy and fun element back in for a child that's sort of gotten ahead of themselves. Look at books like that and bring those sorts of things in, because that's a very good recommendation. The doll books are really good recommendation for that, and just sort of bringing those in. I also don't think The Hobbit is a horrible, but I would keep it for 6, 7. Sam's 10 and he's reading The Hobbit, but he started reading it last year, and then he got hooked on the Land of Stories books, and so he had put The Hobbit down and was reading the Land of Stories books, which those are really good books, the Land of Stories ones, and they're a series, and so he really has enjoyed those. But those are probably 8, 9, 10-year-old, and they're a great little fairy tale twist. 5-year-old there are some fairy tales that are super simple, and I really love there's a great article by Joan Allman. If you do a Google search, Joan Allman, Almon, Joan, Joan, for choosing fairy tales, and you'll get this great article that will come up on choosing fairy tales for the different ages. And I think that it's an incredibly insightful and helpful article, and she gives a great list of fairy tales that are perfect, simple ones that are perfect for like the 4-year-old set, ones that are perfect that are a little more complicated for the 5-year-old set, and more complicated for the 6-year-olds. And so she goes sort of through that, and then I liked that article because it really, and I read that article years ago, probably right after, maybe not right after it came out, but years ago with my big kids. And so it helped me sort of understand the level of complexity that is appropriate for each grade or each age. And so I think that one thing that's important is we sort of see our children maybe being able to handle more complexity, and we think that we should just open that door really wide and sort of allow more and bring in more, and that's not generally the case. Generally, just because they can understand maybe Magic Tree House book number 542, whatever number they're on these days, that doesn't mean they're really understanding it and they're really getting it, because they're not at the right age. So those Magic Tree House books are probably good for like the 9-year-old, maybe 8, 9, 10, even though they sort of bring in some subjects that we talk about later in Waldorf, but they keep it in sort of a fun place. But then I kind of don't, I know I'm weird. I'm going to say something super controversial probably. I really have a problem with those books. And I didn't for a while, and we had a bunch of them on tape or on audio, and Sam loved them. The more I listened to them, the more I thought, these kids are lying all the time. They're lying to all the grown-ups in their lives. They're lying to their parents, and they're going off with these strange people that they don't know. I don't want my kids thinking about that. I don't want my kids thinking some guy down the street is going to take them to a Magic Tree House. No, thank you. So, I kind of put the ban on Magic Tree House. And so the stories are what sticks with them, but I really don't dig stories where kids are lying to their parents all the time. So, or lying to adults in general. I think that sort of sets them up. So I love Mary Pope Osborne, and I love the way she can tell a story, but dang, that Jack and Annie, no thank you. For the same reason I couldn't wrap my head around Hannah Montana lying to everybody. So anyway, that's just me and my thoughts about that. But lying is just like super frustrating to me, and it's super frustrating when you have kids that think it's okay, and when we have authors that are really good authors in other ways, and that's sort of the base, because that is the base of the Magic Tree House books, is the base is that these kids lie to their parents and they go off to this tree house, and then they go on these adventures with strangers that their parents don't know. And we sort of teach our kids what's a stranger. A stranger is somebody you don't know and that you don't have permission to talk to, and there's somebody that mom and dad doesn't know, so that's a stranger. And so it's really funny when Soraya was like, Morgan Le Fay, she's a stranger. I'm like, yup, she's a stranger. Jack and Annie are doing something they shouldn't be doing. So so that's my Jack and Annie rant. But I would really just think about sort of what you've got. There's so many good books. If you have a younger child that's reading, just go and sit at the library and just look at what they've got. Go to the library without your kids. I like to do that. I like to go, and Eric goes with them a lot, but I generally like to go at least once a year without them, to just sit sit and see what's out there and what they've got, and sort of what things, because there is still some crap at the library. Like even in picture books, I'm like, what? This is the worst book I've ever read. But there are definitely ones that are beautiful books, and you don't know unless you go and you can actually sit there without your kids climbing on you. So I like to go to the library and to Barnes & Noble by myself. Mom asked, what do I think about Dr. Seuss? I like, actually, Dr. Seuss because, especially if you can get your kids to repeat some of the rhyming to you. There are some good tongue twisters in Dr. Seuss. And so often, and we don't have any in the house right now, but you know, there are definitely favorites that come home from the library on a regular basis. We have the Lorax and we have the Sneetches book. I think Dr. Seuss did a lot of fun, crazy, silly things to sort of teach some good values. Like the Lorax is this beautiful environmentalist book, beautiful, and it totally reaches kids from 4 to 104. I think the Sneetches is a good book because of the same, and the Star-Bellied Sneetches, that's like a really good, like, you don't have to dress and be like everybody else. You should just be an original person. So I think that there are definitely some of his books that are good on like a moral level, and I like that because it sort of touches, because he was such a good writer, the way he wrote, it touches a big age group. I also like some of the rhyming that can go on, and some of the tongue twisters that can go on, and some of the shorter, more simpler ones. So, I definitely wouldn't close the doors. Now, you wouldn't find that generally in a Waldorf school, but I don't think that he's a horrible author in that regard. And I think that he can be a good, a good author to turn to, especially for those kids that are reading early. And a lot of us learn, I don't know about you guys, but I learned to read on Green Eggs and Ham and Dick and Jane books. So, and don't forget the Dick and Jane books are other, I was mentioning Mouse Soup and Frog and Toad. The Dick and Jane books come in a thick compilation now too, and so those would be fine books. I mean, they're kind of dull and silly, but those would be fine books to bring in for your early reader as well. So I want you to know that just because I'm giving ideas for parents that do have early readers, that does not mean that you should push your child. Do not. Just let them unfold. So Mom asks, I wonder why not in a Waldorf school? Probably because the pictures are crazy and outlandish. That's my guess. They're not, the storylines themselves aren't bad, but I think the pictures are they're really in your face. And so that doesn't fit with the idea that things should be calming and soothing and not so bright. But when the mainstay of our books is calming, soothing, and not so bright, it's okay, I think, as a parent to have some of those at home. I don't have a problem with those at all. So anyways, but that's really what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to sort of talk about the kids that are reading early, and Mom, don't feel guilty about that. Even if you push them, don't feel guilty about it. That now is the time for you to, if you came to Waldorf late and you pushed your child to read in 100 easy lessons at age 4, and now you're like, dang it, I messed some things up. Take a deep breath. Save guilt for sin. I love that saying. And walk forward from here. Instilling magic, having a good time, getting on the floor playing with them, getting them out to run, and just have fun. And don't be so stressed out about what you did. I think it's really easy to read Steiner and think, I have messed them up. They are going to be in therapy about this. And they might be. I mean, there have been things that therapy gets a bad rap because I think it's a good place for kids and adults to be able to talk some things out. But I think that there are definitely things that I've done that I'm like, oh, dear, that was not a good idea. But all parents do that. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. And I think it's important to realize that while Steiner wrote on development, he was extremely intelligent when it came to that. His children were his students. He did not have children of his own. So when you read a passage and you go, oh no, what have I done? Don't do that. Just go, oh, well, now I know better for the next child. And I believe that things are fixable. I believe, especially, I think that God, source, whatever your noun is for the Great Spirit, I believe that intent is what God looks at. And if your intent was harm, then that's what God looks at as harm. If your intent was to do the good, then that's what's seen as well. So don't be so stressed out about those sorts of things. Just take a deep breath and walk forward from here. And if you're having struggles and trying to figure out how you're going to walk forward from here because maybe you feel like you're in way too deep, just send me a message and I'll try to help you sort of sort through that. What should we do with all of the books we have? I look at them now and think the pictures are left. I purge books as often as I purge other things. So we have a handful of books that are always here. And then some that have rotated. So I was on a kick a couple of years ago. I was like, I'm going to collect every Elsa Beska book. Now y'all know how many books that is. That's a lot of books. And they're not all awesome. I mean, some of them they're all beautifully illustrated, but sometimes the storylines are kind of flat. So we picked the ones that we really liked and we moved the rest of them on. So we rotate them through. And I think, I'm sort of at the end because my youngest is 5. And so we've sort of rotated through. There's a couple of books that I've owned probably 2 or 3 times because I went, oh, this kid will like this book. And so maybe I've sold it or I've traded it off for something else and I brought it back in the house. But I rotate through, and my kids probably have, their shelf probably has 30 books on it. But they're 30 books that they look at on a regular basis. Right now, my 5-year-old's favorite 2 books are The Little Lost Unicorn and Uni the Unicorn. So that sort of tells you where everything's unicorns, rainbows, and hearts right now. So, I look at sort of what it is that it's sort of a cyclical thing. But I do purge books. I purge my own books, purge their books, and we sort of go through that on a regular basis. And I really like the library for that. The library sort of helps me keep my money in my wallet. And the library is a good way for me to go, oh, this is a book that they really like. If they don't want to take it back to the library and my husband has rechecked it out 3 times, then that might be time to use Amazon Prime and get that book here. So I sort of do those sorts of things because that's how we got Uni the Unicorn, because Soraya checked it out, and then she couldn't check it out anymore, and she was super sad. So, we brought it home. But I think that you can really utilize the library. If you're not going to the library once a week, you really ought to consider going once a week. And we actually have a book limit, because if we don't, then, I have a house full of books, and then on library day, nobody can find them. And so right now they have a 4-book limit, but sometimes it's a 6-book limit, but I always say before we go to the library, today you may get X books. And if we're walking to the library, on the train to the library, then I'll sell them when they have this big gigantic Lego book that's this thick, and this is mostly Samuel. I'll say, do you really want to carry that in your backpack all the way home? Mm-hmm. And he'll think about it. And maybe he'll decide that that's the one book he wants to carry in his backpack all the way home. But we sort of, rein it back a little bit. So I would definitely go every week. My kids go every week. We've gone every week for probably a lot of years. Always gone every week. I can't think of a time when we didn't go every week, no matter what city we lived in. So, going every week has been super helpful. It teaches them responsibility. All of my kids have always had their own library card from the time that they could have their own library card. Some libraries we were in, they couldn't have them until they could write their name. Some libraries, they give them a library card when they're not even walking. So, it's been a good experience for them because they keep track of their books. And if they are careless with books, then they know what it's like to have to use some of their allowance to pay a fine or help pay for a book. So they're really good and careful with books because of that. So, go to the library once a week. I used to really like story time, and Sam would go to story time. Eric took Sam to story time all the time when he was little. But story time's sort of gone from a great storybook to let's learn your ABCs and no. So I look at story time, and sometimes they go and he'll look at and see what the topics are. And if they're topics that are way too heady, like let's teach your 3-year-old the solar system. No. So we just sort of skip it. But the library itself is a place that I want them to know how to act in. Because if they know how to act in the library, guess what? They also know how to act at church. They know how to act in a museum. So this is places that we take them to often so that they know how to act and not be crazy. So anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next week. So if you have an idea, then or something that you really want me to talk about that I haven't talked about yet, drop me a note and give me a suggestion. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. I hope it's beautiful where you are. The sun is up here, but it's looking kind of cloudy. But everything it's always pretty here. Doesn't matter if it's cloudy and nasty. Anyway, so I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye now.